In the first meeting, there's only two responses you can get. No, or let's have another meeting. You cannot get a yes.
That's Jim Armstrong, venture capitalist who's hit the Forbes Midas list 4 times, generated over $750 million in returns, and led PayPal's first institutional round, negotiating the merger with Elon Musk that created the company as we know today.
The more you try to put into that first meeting, the less persuasive you're going to be. In the second meeting, everything changes. Suddenly, people are willing to dive in. They're willing to hear details they were not willing to hear. What would have not been persuasive in the first meeting is suddenly persuasive.
He reveals why investors back lines, not dots. Your job is to show consistent upward trajectory, not just one impressive moment.
Just want to think creatively about who you know who can get you to people. I never recommend diving in without a plan, but sometimes that's the thing to do.
And now he's building Composite Ventures, focusing on the intersection of AI and brick and mortar retail, where he's betting the next wave of billion-dollar outcomes will emerge.
Entire private equity industry, its meal ticket has been SaaS. That is going away.
What's up, guys? I'm Jeff. I'm a serial entrepreneur and investor. And on this podcast, I sit down with the world's top founders to unpack how they actually build, scale, and think to help entrepreneurs get the tools and inspiration they need to succeed. What were you doing before you started to invest, and why did you make the decision to make that move?
I had, just like a lot of people, been searching for what to do. So I got a undergraduate degree in economics. I did finance for a while just because I thought it was fun to learn it and learn some of the structure of that. I did programming for a while. I tried to play, professional golf for a living, which, didn't work. I was an entrepreneur with some small businesses. So for me, my story, and this is more of a 90s story, I don't know if this applies today, I went back to graduate school. And that's where, for me, in my mid to late 20s, really late 20s, that's where suddenly a lot of things that were all fuzzy for me suddenly became clear. And I got introduced to a venture capital. I was in Austin, Texas, at the graduate school there at University of Texas. And I was trying to get away from finance. That was my goal. And I interned one summer, and I'm like, this is it. So that was how I got into it. And really for the intellectual challenge of it. Right. I can make an argument that venture capital is an incredible business and a terrible business model. Right. It is. I mean, it is compared to some other business models. We may not get into that today, but it is definitely, I think, much like being a founder, where you may have hard days and challenging days, but you don't have boring days.
What was your first investment?
My real first investment, when I was at this firm, I was a junior person, so I didn't get to lead anything. And in 1998, my wife said, I don't want to live in Austin anymore. It's too hot. I want to go back to the West Coast where we were from. And there was an incubator out in Pasadena that was famous, again, this is a long time ago, called Idea Lab. And that person who ran that, a guy named Bill Gross, was really, truly a founder. He was a visionary on believing that the internet, again, this sounds like I'm talking about Vietnam, I apologize, but I've been around a while, was going to be an important thing. And at the time, a lot of VCs said, we're not sure. And so he was starting companies. I know there's some people in this audience I've talked to who were there with him starting those. And he didn't have a venture. He was frustrated because there was no venture capital arm that would believe and trust in him. So I joined him early to start a fund that did that. And the first investment was a company that you've heard the story from the eventual CEO who took it public more than once, but literally we pulled it out of the trash can. And it was an idea that you could do internet service ad supported. At the time, internet service was $29 a month, and this was not fast internet service. This is AOL, right? So the analogy today would be, does ChatGPT get to charge $200 a month forever, or does that fall? And we made a bet that the infrastructure costs were going to fall. That company was called NetZero, and it was like a $2 million valuation. It was 4 entrepreneurs out in the valley in the tiniest little space in a strip mall. But they had a prototype, and they just wanted a little bit of money. And then we did the series. Again, they didn't have seed then or bridge notes. So it was just A, B, C. And 3 years later, it was, public for $5 billion. Now, it was a dot-com money loser. But I will say over the course of that company as a public company, it ended up not being able to win a market. So it ended up being a cash flow company. And that CEO, who I know you know as an investor and advisor, he was able to return over $1 billion in cash to as a public company to investors. So it became something, but it didn't win a market.
3 years from that initial pitch and funding to going public.
Yeah. And the lesson there is that when markets are open, speaking to the founders here, it's worth developing the skill to know when markets are open. Because when they're open, you can move fast. And I'm not saying that's good for investors always, right? That wasn't good for the investors at WeWork. It wasn't good for some investors, but it is a thing. And if you're going to be a founder or anywhere involved in investing, it's an important thing to be aware of, that the herd mentality that exists in elementary school and junior high and high school and everywhere else, there's no reason that goes away, right? When you become a grown up and you work in capital markets. So, and we see, we can talk about AI a little bit and some of the things going on, but they had incredible momentum without revenue, and they went public on that.
Let's talk about PayPal. So let's take me back to the first time you were pitched PayPal, and I'm curious, iconic company, was it a super competitive bidding process to try and get that deal, or is this one of those stories where the founder just couldn't find his champion out there?
It's the latter. So the company was called Confinity at the time, and they had an idea to obviously this is pre-iPhone. This is around 2000 or 1999, and they had an idea to come in and facilitate payments on what was a leading smartphone of the time called the Palm Trio, and it was the Palm OS. And Max Levchin and Peter Thiel came to pitch me, and nobody would fund these guys. They had Nokia Ventures as a strategic because they were going to work on Nokia phones. But the whole trick, it seemed, was that they beamed. These early phones had an infrared port beam. Think of it like pre-Bluetooth. God, I sound old. But the software beamed with the actual payment. So there was no, you need to go get that app, right? Again, pre-app, but effectively it was an early app. But what struck me was Peter was obviously smart, right? He ended up being very difficult to work with, but he's very smart. And Max Levchin was brilliant in the way that he said to me, this is how I've thwarted fraud. And that was key. So I'll never forget the first board meeting, the first board meeting post-product launch, and the numbers were straight up, right? And I remember Peter Thiel really apologizing. I don't have a revenue model. I'm so sorry I don't have a revenue model. And I remember thinking, I think saying, we don't need a revenue model because you're moving money, right? If you're very close to money, you can always create a little tiny sliver. And that's why FinTech is such a popular, maybe even over-popular type of investment, because you get a pass on a lot of the revenue model stuff. There are whole funds dedicated to this now. But that was how we invested in it, and it took off. And then not long after that, he came to me and said, look, there's this company called X.com, and they're right next to us on University Avenue in Palo Alto. And so much so they were stealing each other's screenshots out of the dumpsters at night, right? Now, X.com, started by Elon Musk, was an online mutual fund at the time, backed by Sequoia Capital. And I felt it had nothing. Like, I felt we had the product, but Peter really wanted to merge for some reasons that we go into some other time or later today. But, and they had cut a really bad deal, like 80% to X and 20% to PayPal. And so I said, okay, I want to sit down with these guys because that's not going to fly. We have all the goods. It should be 80-20 the other way. And that's how I started the meeting with Musk, and on and through this lunch and long lunch. But we ended up just shaking hands on 50-50, which is what happened. And so that became, like a lot of companies, the popular product becomes the company name. So that became PayPal.
I just want to take a moment to talk about something that's really important to me and something I've been working on for years. If you like these conversations with founders, the mindset shifts, and the real questions behind building companies, I go much deeper on all of that in my book, High Five Energy. I wrote it for people who are thinking about starting something or who already have, but want to lead with more clarity and purpose. The book gives you practical tools to get into high-five energy flow state, attract the right people, and build in a way that actually feels aligned. High-five energy includes interviews with 18 legendary founders who've had over $200 billion in exits and IPOs. If you're new to entrepreneurship or even just considering taking the leap, this book is for you. High-five energy is available now wherever books are sold, or hit the link below. When you initially got that pitch, was it the beaming money product that blew you away, or was it the people? Like, why did you, after them being said no to so many times, why were you the one to say yes?
It's a great question. I hadn't done that much fintech at the time. Maybe one other company. Combination, the party trick of beaming the software, the quality of the thinking, right? Especially, and then 3, the security functions from Max. And I knew enough about that every fintech product that's ever really launched in the internet is subject to massive fraud. Massive. I mean, NetZero launched one and it had 98% fraud. That was the payments. There was no real payments on there. It was just people, fraudulently. And it's tough, right? You put something out in the world, software that says there's money involved if you can get into this app, who's going to come running first? And so Max went through how he had designed this with layers of protocol and security that were there, but without slowing down the app, that were really impressive to me.
Did he have a good sense of the competitive landscape? Did he know the others as well as he did his own?
From a product perspective, Peter knew the others, right? Peter was really good at that. But even with all that, I'll tell you, this is a tale of startups that I never recommend just diving in without a plan. But sometimes that's the thing to do. You would think that we would have figured out that eBay would have been the driver of PayPal, right? Any reasonable person would have guessed that. Caught us totally off guard, right? So we just saw this takeoff of eBay. And so then eBay got together with Wells Fargo, raised $140 million to launch a product called BillPoint, and then suddenly made our product much harder to use on eBay. So we were debating them, and we got to know some of the eBay executives and said, look, you can't do this. This is illegal. And they said, we're going to kill you. But despite all that, PayPal was just still easier to use and people preferred it. So eBay offered $300 million to buy the company. We said no. $500 million, no. $800 million, no. And really the whole reason we went public with some growing revenue with a very tiny float, which just means we offered 6% of the shares to the public, was to price the investment. We kind of knew eBay would buy it. So the night before the lockup came off, when all these shares were going to flood the market, potentially, they offered $1.5 billion, and that was the deal that got done.
Do you remember how eBay happened originally?
I remember the early days of the internet in terms of Furbies.
In terms of PayPal reaching out to eBay, and like who knew who? Was it a cold call? Any recollection?
I don't. Sorry. That was all within management. I mean, they were all pretty clubby in the Bay Area in the early days of the internet. So I think it was, I know Tom Fisher was involved, and I think I've introduced you to Tom. We're still friends. He was the CTO at eBay before going on to Qualcomm. And I remember our first meeting, he's like, we're going to destroy you guys. And we're friends today. So it's kind of cool. But I know I believe it started with a technical relationship. Look, we should talk. And then it got elevated to management. I think that's what happened.
So what was the original investment? What were the terms?
I invested $5 million for 20% of the company. So at
$5 million for 20% of the company. And what was the return on that investment?
Less than you think, because it was a merger, 50-50 in dilution, but it was just under $100 million. So again, people think PayPal's worth $100 billion. That was eBay. eBay gets a lot of credit. When eBay bought PayPal, even though it was a public company, it was still a small company. So, if you want to say who gets the credit for making PayPal what it is today, it's eBay.
Who was the next founder that you came across that really blew you away, who ended up having one of your larger returns?
I think Scott Painter is a really interesting guy, right? I met Scott really early. For those of you who know Scott, he just never stops. He's got an engine, and he can formulate things. He did Cars Direct, which I invested in and went public, and then it's been taken private since. He did some other companies I invested in. TrueCar is his company. He loves the automobile industry. And I can't remember if you've interacted with Scott, but he knows everything about his markets. I'd say, and others as well, but Scott stands out as a kind of a model entrepreneur if you're an investor, which is a whole different topic.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Why is he a model entrepreneur? What does a model entrepreneur look like to you?
It's first of all, I always think it's interesting. I think what draws in a lot of investors because of the world they live in is an entrepreneur who knows their market. And I don't mean the competitive sets. I mean questions such as, why has nobody been successful in this market before? Questions such as, why is the leader in your industry only worth a small amount as a public company? Why is this company a leader? Never mind the worth of it. What products do they have? But someone who can say how the industry's organized, right? And again, this is very much how I think an investor who's managing, not an individual investor, but an investor who's managing institutional money with a large venture fund is forced to think. But I think, for example, you could say the automotive industry is a really large industry. If you look at it as a share of wallet from Americans, it's a massive share, probably only behind home ownership. But it has almost no startups in it that are successful. Right? In fact, even Tesla started saying, I want to build a battery. Pretty quick, everyone said, I'm not going to ever believe in your battery. Great, I'll build a car and then you'll see, right? So why are certain industries open to startups and they can absorb startups and startups can get money and grow and be valued? And why are certain industries completely locked down? There was reasons for that. That's a thing. It's the way competition works. It's the way really the buyers work and control the supply chains and innovation. And essentially, in my opinion, the reason so many venture investors invest in technology is because technology forces every industry to always be off balance. And so you can't lock things down, right? And certain other industries like travel constantly have new startups that come along. And I'm talking B2C or B2B. Again, and I'm not saying I can do it. I just recognize it when I see it. When you see someone come in and say, this is why the industry looks this way today. Here's the product I'm going to introduce to the industry. Here's the milestones I hope to achieve. I need this much money. What can I put you down for? Right? That is intoxicating to an investor. And it is a different way to pitch than to say, I have this coffee cup and it's got this thing and I think it's really cool. Right. And I think you can do that too, but then you've got to frame it. And by the way, the pitch can be 300 seconds. It can be 5 slides. But I always think that's a great place to start. And particularly, we can go more into that with AI.
How about authenticity in a founder?
Key. I mean, that's to me personally, that was always the most important thing because one of my mentors early on at my first firm, Austin Ventures, told me, you're going to be in business with this person for 3, 5, 7, 9, it's more like 12, 15 years. And if you have a really, it's not about fun, a really authentic, say efficient conversation, I'll use the word efficient, feels like the wrong word, but if you have that, then your board meetings are going to be like that. Some of my most frustrating companies have been, the signal was right there the whole time. The signal was right there trying to stick its head up through the noise saying, hey, we got the wrong product. Or, hey, we got the right product over here. And everybody was so concerned with putting on their happy ears and everything's great and don't be worried about your money. I despise that. We missed it. To me, you can almost grade a startup effort, a project on, are you doing your best to get all the information you can and are you really looking for signal? Because we all fall in love with our projects and you don't want to believe. And then you hear all these people say, well, the key to this is never give up, never stop believing. But sometimes trying to find truth in a startup is really, really an exercise.
Well, let's talk about Integrien, because at some point there were signals from that company, and it seemed like none of the other investors saw it except for you. Could you take me through that story?
Yeah. So there was a really two neat entrepreneurs out of Glendale, right? Part of this kind of Armenian mafia that I call, but it's just one of the great entrepreneur communities in LA. That said, again, I did a lot of my early work in data centers and something like that. So I'll try to not keep it boring. And data centers don't even exist anymore because now they're all owned by cloud companies. But at the time, things were different. And they said, look, we've got this major problem where people have no transparency and visibility into the complexity that they need to manage their compute and manage their networks. And all this is going into data centers and you can't see. And we have a company, again, started by a very smart technical founder, Dr. Mazda Marvasti, great guy. And he said, look, this is my vision. I haven't quite built it yet, but here's what we want to build. And so I said, great, let's do this. And we launched it, and the Great Recession hit, and it was hard times. People weren't spending. To be fair, this company was a poster child for happy years. I couldn't find the truth ever at any board meetings. I used to say, I don't want to feel really great at a board meeting. I want all the bad news. Send the good news out ahead of time. And let's talk about all the stuff that's not working privately if you don't want to put that down. But let's find the signal. We were able to recruit some good secondary investors and build a nice syndicate. And then they ran out of money, mostly because the CEO was just always believing. We've all worked with people like this, and it's really important to have a constant belief system. We all ginny up our own every day in this market we're in. I'm kind of founding a new venture fund, and every day I get, a few slings across the back and arrows, and you have to do that. But in this particular case, it turned into a negative. So bridged the company once, bridged it again, and my partners at this point are getting pretty angry with me. And then the other investor just stopped participating at all. So I said, well, I'm going to take your shares. And they said, fine. I was trying to motivate him to invest, but
And is this like a $20,000 wire, or this is
more like 100 to 200, I'd say, maybe a little
every
more.
wire?
Yeah. But anyway, 12 times. Like my CFO was just like, it almost got to the point where my CFO would just dread me walking in the office. My CFO, the firm was called Clearstone Venture Partners, one of my venture funds. It was about a $200 million fund. And anyway, about $20 million in, there was a big company called VMware. And I knew when they saw what we had built, because it was really built for the virtualization market, which again was happening at the time where servers virtualize. And this was the one product that you could look in. And they bought it for $100 million. But by that time, we had taken all the shares of all the other investors. So, we ended up returning about $50 million. So it wasn't the greatest return, but honestly, one of my moments I'm most proud of.
Why do you think you were able to do that over and over again? Where there are a lot of investors out there that would have just bowed out, thinking about their LPs. It's just not working. Is it because you just knew the product was working, or was it because you just believed in the team? What was it?
I think it was three things, if I'm honest. One, it was my firm. I mean, I had partners, but I raised the money for that fund. So, if it would have been Jim in another environment where I had some overlords, I couldn't have been as bold. So there's something to being a founder and in charge. That's a thing, and that's important. Two is I did the work. So I really spent a lot of time running around Silicon Valley, talking to Dell, talking to VMware, talking to HP, looking at these products, OpenView. Tivoli had one called Cockpit that IBM was running, the competitor products. And I could see there was a need. We just couldn't get the message out right. I think, and at the end, that's why I got into venture, right? I didn't get in this to be a fund manager. And I've done a 180 on this. I'll be clear, but I remember raising money in 2005, and I overheard we were bringing a bag of pitch books to a big office in New York, a big capital fund, and I overheard them. One of the people say they called me a fund manager. The fund managers are here. I mean, my partners thought I was going to lose it. I'm like, I'm not this isn't Fidelity or Putnam or Janus. I'm not a fund manager. And so at that point, I was really in venture. My job in venture was, I hope I have returns. I want to have returns, but that's not why I'm doing this. And of course, I never have said that out loud. I didn't even know that. This is all subconscious, thinking about it over the years. Today, I'm a very good fund manager. And I still have room for startups. I have to build that in, but that allowed me to do this because a person focused on returns would not have done what I did, and I'm not sure I'd be supportive of a partner. I would have to think about if I'd be supportive of one of my partners doing this today.
Well, upon that reflection, do you think that that's maybe why you were so successful as an investor?
Yeah, I do. I do. I have a lot of write-offs, right? So I think I follow the classic venture, which is invest in 8 or 9 investments a fund and 2 hit, and you get 6 zeros or almost zeros. And that really does hurt. I hate that part of it so much so I've left some of the early stage stuff, or said differently, I do it with my own money. I hate losing other people's money. Hate it. I really love making people money. I hate going to people and say, your money's lost. You've all done it or are doing it or will do it. You've done it. It's just, if you're going to be a baseball player and you can't strike out, you shouldn't be a baseball player. So I'm still trying to figure that out, what I do there. But yeah, and I think part of it was being in LA too. At the time, there were 5 venture funds in LA when we raised Clearstone in 1998 in Idea Lab, and we were going to do things differently, right? We were going to prioritize Southern California companies, which again, if I heard that as a strategy as a pension fund, I'd say that doesn't sound very smart. And we were just going to, do things differently. It started with Idea Lab, and we see around corners. We're willing to take a bet on the future, right? We may not talk about our company today, but that's exactly what that was. And there's rewards for that, but there's costs as well.
What was the craziest pitch you ever got?
Outside of yours?
We'll talk about mine.
I've been pitched a perpetual motion machine, right? Basically, that's my words for it. You put in 10 watts, you get out 12. I've been given pitches for things that aren't really possible, physics wise. I'll leave that one there. Too many to mention. But honestly,
you ever get pitched by Elon for SpaceX after PayPal?
I did. We sat down, and it was really interesting. I think it's an insight into the guy who I can't. I was in touch with him till a few years ago, but we were talking, and he said, well, what are you investing in now? And I think I mentioned something around data centers. And he said, Jim, you know what the biggest venture capital opportunity was in 1850? What? Kerosene, Jim. Because kerosene was going to replace whale oil for an illuminant in lamps. Jim, you're investing in kerosene. What does that mean, Elon? Mars. What? There's no money in Mars. There's no money in space. And SpaceX would have been, he never brought me Tesla after that, but SpaceX would have been a bad investment, I still say, for Clearstone, because we were a $200 million fund. And that thing went through so much money that in this business, it is like a poker, like Texas Hold'em. If you don't have the stack to protect your position, you get blown out. In the same way that I took the shares of those companies that wouldn't keep funding Integrien. And the way he runs a company, he and Scott Painter are pretty good friends. They both run companies the same way. And I love entrepreneurs like that. They're amazing. I honor them. I'm not one of them, but they run them full speed, 100 miles an hour, and always about to go out of business. And I just didn't want to do that. It's great when it works, but there's not a lot of books written about the ones that don't work.
So let's talk. A lot of founders are here, are either actively raising money or thinking about raising money. Any advice on the best way to get intros to investors that they're either trying to talk to, or if they don't know who they should talk to, how to find those people?
Intros. Yeah, I mean, I think
you've mentioned the triangle of...
Yeah, so I forgot about that. Yeah. But so first of all, my email is jim@composite.ventures, composite.ventures. That's my new firm, like a composite, Jim at, or LinkedIn. I'll help if I can, absolutely, because I know, people come and like, well, I didn't get a chance to. I'll be out here with you guys. Same thing. I'm raising money right now. I'm trying to get investors introductions to LPs. So I am somebody in your chair. So the you can always just do blunt force, which is to reach out. I will be back in my office today sending 20 emails that I've crafted, trying to meet new LPs, right? Because we're trying to do a whole bunch of different things that are crafted just like you craft them, right? And I try to personalize them and try to think about click-through rate and who will respond, and it's just a numbers game, all that stuff. I do believe that when I look at across my career and all of my venture colleagues, sometimes I'll ask the question, have you ever done one investment that came in unsolicited? And the answer is almost always no. And so I think when we talk about the triangle, right, you just want to think creatively about who you know who can get you to people. So I just gave you my email. If I can help, I can. If I can help, I will. But thinking creatively like that through partnerships, through customer sets. When we wanted to sell Integrien, we knew we kind of had to sell it. The market was evolving, right? Even my fund was running out of money, right? In terms of the amount, we had limits on how much we could put into any company. I was running out of powder. So the way you sell a company is kind of the way you raise money. So JP Morgan Chase loved the product, which went on to become $1 billion revenue product for VMware. It was doing $5 million at the time we sold it for $100 million. But we went to JP Morgan Chase, who's obviously not going to buy a product like that, and knew that they spent $40 million a year with VMware. And so we had that CTO call VMware and say, because he believed in the product, and say, I don't know if you've looked at this product, but whoever buys this product, that's who I'm shifting my IT spend to. And that got us the meeting with Paul Moritz, the CEO of VMware at the time, who we knew we would like it. So there's an example of an introduction. I think being really creative, I know there's a human need. I have it too, to want to go meet people, talk with people. We met. Oh, they rejected us, but we met. We had coffee, we met. I'm in New York, I'm traveling around, we're meeting people. I'm trying to get rid of that, right? Because it's just hard. So one of the key things I found in fundraising, if I can go on a little longer on this, is differentiate between the first meeting and every other meeting. So the minute you believe, and this is just my theory only, that in the first meeting, there's only 2 responses you can get, and you have to really believe this. It's going to be no, or let's have another meeting. You cannot get a yes. So in that case, comprehensive is the opposite of persuasive. The more you try to put into that first meeting, the less persuasive you're going to be. I'm not saying you're glib, like I'm doing something really cool, but I don't have time to tell you, right? But almost. So for example, you go to a first meeting, and this isn't a VC thing. This is a human thing. You do it the same way. If you have someone looking for a job, if you have someone looking to sell you a product for your startup, we all do triage because we're trying to get through the day with, in a sane manner. You look at something, no. Look at something, no. So the decision you're really making up front is, am I going to create headspace for this? So if you can get a meeting, even if it's with a junior person in the firm or someone who knows the firm or an advisor, you just keep it really short and persuasive. All you're trying to do is get the second meeting. In the second meeting, everything changes. Suddenly, people are willing to dive in. They're willing to hear details they were not willing to hear. What would have not been persuasive in the first meeting is suddenly persuasive. You'll even see sometimes a junior person who's on, say, the venture fund side stand up and say, whoa, tell them what you told me last week. Tell them. In other words, you now have a sponsor. Where did that come from? So be quick, be pithy. I'm actually doing a little video overview of this large financing we're raising for a company, where I'm just going to voice it over myself, because I can't send someone an 18-page investment memo on a first meeting. I can send it to my friends, my colleagues, my LPs I've worked with and made money with for years. So those are some thoughts.
I love the personal hack of wanting to meet someone and just telling them I'm going to be in San Francisco on next week. Are they around? To take away the pressure of, hey, would you like to meet? I'll come to San Francisco. It's almost 99% a no. But if you're there anyway and you happen to be in, North Carolina, and not a lot of people go. So any entrepreneurs in your life did that to you?
Yeah. And by the way, and I do that too. It doesn't always work. I know for March Capital, a fund I co-founded in 2014, I flew to Geneva for lunch, right? I said, I'm going to be in Geneva. My partner went to Kuala Lumpur. But so I get it.
I flew to India.
Yeah. You and your co-founders flew to India. Yeah, there was a great guy in LA who's well known. He had a really great exit. He's fabulously wealthy now, and he's an always on guy. He's the kind of guy that no matter how much money he makes, he's going to be like an Elon Musk or other entrepreneurs. He's not in it for the money. He's making money. He's focused. He's aware of his money, but his name's Amit Jain. If some of you know him, he founded a company called eCinity, became Bridge. And he was great. He was at Google, and he'd come by the Clearstone office. He'd say, I'm going to be around. And he knew enough that knew he had the Google card, right? So, of course, I'm going to take a meeting. Someone at Google is coming by. If you're sitting in your office today and someone unknown says, hey, I'm with OpenAI. I'm working on some stuff. You want to grab a coffee? Hey, let's talk, right? And he was laying the foundation, right? So, again, finding a tangent you can talk about with somebody or bringing someone to this, those are great ways to establish a relationship, right? We as humans are all very much programmed to say, I don't know someone, I'm fine just not answering this. I've met someone, I have to answer it, or I should answer it, or I want to answer it, right? Those are real. And again, you aren't selling somebody something they're not going to like. You're believing in you're going to sell someone a way to be fabulously successful, and that's a good thing. So Amit Jain did that, and when it came time for his company, the runway was there. It was like one or two meetings. He said, I don't know what I want to build, but I think this industry, great example, this is what's going on in the retail industry, brick and mortar. This is what's going on with Amazon. These two forces are going to meet. Do you believe that the brick and mortar retail industry is just going to roll over and say, oh, shucks, I guess we'll just shut all the Home Depots down or Targets down? I don't believe that. Me neither. Do you think it's going to be something they're going to need in this area? Yeah. Well, that's what I want to build. I'm in. Right. And we sold it for, about $500 million a couple years ago. And it was a really innovative product that's key in a tech stack today that is generating a lot of revenue for that industry.
Was that a straight shot for them?
No. There was not down rounds, but almost. There was really tough times. There was name changes. There was pivots. The company did I'd say a 5 out of 10 job at finding the signal. Looking back, it was there earlier saying, over here, this is what to build. No, we're building this. Everyone stay focused. Over here, this is valuable to the customer. Stay focused. But eventually, Amit, who's relentless and every Saturday, every Sunday, every day, every night, so much so I worried about him, he got it done. So it changed its name. It went, Morpheus came in on the B round, Visa came in on the C or the BC round. And again, when we realized that in the COVID tech boom, that retail was scrambling and looking, and suddenly here comes e-commerce and there was a need, it was the right time to sell.
It just shows the importance of relationship building.
Absolutely. And he did. He came by. And again, I know in my first funds, based on who I said I was earlier in my career, I did a terrible job of that. We took in a couple $100 million. I didn't want to talk to my LPs. I'm not flying to New York to see them. I don't want to talk with them. I want to go meet entrepreneurs. And again, all of us have this. If I could go back and do it again, I would do it way differently.
And that's how we met, right? I was doing my first company, Ride Amigos. It was a transportation company, first taxi sharing website before Uber. And how many times did I pitch you Ride Amigos after we met in LA? You were one of the first investors I met in Los Angeles.
4 or 5.
4 or 5 times. And
but you said I just wanted to buy and give you an update. And I was interested enough in it to talk about it, right? There was some business model things we sparred on and you had really good responses back. But there's something to being persistent in a fun way and always sharing information, not just, hey, let's get together. And we have a lot of Hollywood entertainment. It seems to be, hey, let's get together. Let's get together. People are busy, man. There's a lot of traffic in LA. It's raining. There's no parking. Just what do you got? Let's share some information. And you did a great job at that.
And at the end of that 5th meeting, I said, what if I could push a ringtone on your phone so you hear the ringtone I create for you?
Yeah. And I said, Now that's an idea I'll back. I've been really looking at, again, this is, what was this, 2012, 13 maybe? But when you look at models where they go from publish and distribute, like LinkedIn, right, versus resumes. Again, I did a bunch of companies in the hiring market back in the early 2000s. Should have invested in LinkedIn, had the offer to, but didn't. But that kind of I publish is a thing. And that struck me. And you see it now on your iPhone, right? You see someone's picture come in. No one had even thought of that. You started with ringtones, went to video. And then at the time, this is important too, I had just pushed my partners at the time at my fund to do a seed program. Said, we are putting the bar too high. We're putting it too high, and we're just going to miss all this stuff because you can't square the circle. You can't close it. Of course, it's just a goofy idea, and everyone says, well, you shot my goofy idea down last week. I'm going to shoot yours down this week. And partner meetings, we need to have a program where you don't have to ask anyone. If you like it, you can just put in $500,000 and go. We have a big fund. Let's do that, which has become a very popular thing, and you should look for that if you're raising fund. It's called a Scout program or Angel program. But so the timing was good too.
Yeah. So we wrote our first $100,000 check. That's how we kicked off our company, all because of that relationship building over that first year of just consistently being around, saying hi, being a good person, building rapport. We are going to turn it over to the audience, but I do want to ask one kind of grinding question right now as an entrepreneur. AI is just changing the landscape of everybody's lives from a very personal, not I hear about it, but I'm using it every single day. What advice do you have to entrepreneurs in the room that might not be in the space, are be in the space, but how are you seeing it from an investor lens?
Yeah, I have two thoughts on that, and I've been thinking a lot about it. I'm as disoriented as maybe all of you are. Maybe some of you have figured it out. Please come tell me about it. And all my venture friends, because I've been in the industry a long time, they're all partners of big funds. They're calling me saying, what is going on? So I'll give you two lenses to think through that that might be unique. One is that since 2008, the entire private equity industry, and let's take venture capital as a subset of private equity, the alternative industry, private equity versus public company, making money investing in private companies and then trying to get the exit somehow, some way, has its meal ticket has been SaaS. SaaS, before that, you had enterprise deals. You'd sign an enterprise contract worth $4 million, and you'd start every year as a software company on January 1st with zero revenue and a pipeline. And the capital markets hated that. No predictability. So SaaS comes along. Long-term value, CAC, let's draw the lines, let's do the rule of 40, let's have all these metrics. And the capital markets said, hallelujah, brother. And now the capital markets are the customer for venture capital funds. That's important to remember. That's what a VC, even someone like me who got into it for the mission, is forced. Like that pushes you to that point eventually in this career. That is going away. And so there is panic, right? So what are the new revenue models? So again, framing your startup and raising money on that lens as one of many lenses could be helpful to you. Again, I wish I could say more. This is how to finish that sentence. I can't. I'm thinking about it. But I think this is the key that I'm seeing. And I've seen this in every technology innovation, right? Which is that we all get enamored with, isn't this great? I can go online and I can do these things I couldn't do before. Isn't this great? I can pick up this device in my pocket and I can navigate. Isn't this great? Later, what happens, and if you can get ahead of this curve, I think you win in raising money and building a company, because companies have to pay people. They have to generate money. I love open source, but we're talking about founders here with companies and raising money. The question is not being asked at all yet, is where is the money going to come from? Now, we can answer consumers, right? I pay $200 a month for 3.0 on ChatGPT. I've been on OpenAI since early. I pay for several of them. And the ROI is tremendous, right? If I say, wow, I would be paying an analyst $10,000 a month or $20,000 a month. There's a lot of that going on. But when you think of businesses, are they going to drop their SaaS budget? Are they going to say, Salesforce, I'm canceling my subscription with you, my $50,000 a month subscription. I'm a big company or more than that. and I'm shifting over to an agent. Like, how is that going to happen? Right? And thinking about it from the revenue in. And now we had DeepSeek come along, which threatened, which, by the way, that seems like 6 months ago now. Isn't it crazy how fast that's moving? The threat on that, 2 weeks ago, Monday, was that the one revenue model we can see, which is people paying X dollars a month for a user license, feels like that just got disrupted. So there's definitely open source in here. It's definitely different. But I think trying to say the lens of, okay, 3 years from now, if I'm generating X amount of revenue on my startup doing AI, what do the invoices look like? Who do I send them to? What budget does it come out of? And what's the support if they say, this doesn't seem right? Is it users? We're going to tokens and usage. Usage is lumpy. Are there minimums? Like, thinking that through and all the implications of that. And again, a year from now, I hope I can finish that. I'm spending 25% of my day trying to think this through with smart people, just anyone I can get to, including just following people online. But that, everyone talks about the wonder of it and the use case of it, but I think focusing on where the revenue models are going to surface is just going to be key to venture capital funding.
If you got value from this conversation, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. This podcast is about sitting down with people who've actually built things and unpacking the mindset, decisions, and moments that make the difference. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.